Hello, I am Christina Donoghue, the Art and Culture Editor here at Show Studio, and I'm sat next to the lovely Nerea, who we've had illustrating for one day as like a live studio residency. Nerea, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nerea, and I'm going to be illustrating Paris menswear 2025, and I have been working on Louis Vuitton, Walter van Beendork and Rick Owens so far. Yeah.
I mean, the first question I think I want to start off with, which is a very natural one, is why, so you just specifically mentioned the designers you've chosen to illustrate. Out of all of the shows in Paris, why were you attracted to these designs? I know that obviously Louis Vuitton is such a huge show, and if you could just kind of talk a bit about that, really.
Yeah, well, so far I've been interested in the silhouettes presented in most of them, and I guess Louis Vuitton maybe is more traditional silhouettes, but I think maybe for that one it was more the patterns and just because of the video as well, it kind of allows you to immerse yourself and really get a feel for what the message was. I think that Pharrell Williams had a very strong conceptual thing going on, which inspired me quite a lot. I spent a lot of time just looking into that. And yeah, so Walter van Beendork, of course, is very out there. Amazing, and although some of them I felt were maybe too much for me, like too much visual stimulation for me to actually focus on anything, I chose specific ones where I could just reduce the color palette down and look at shape by itself. And the shadows, I think my main interest in these ones was how the light, which was very harsh because it was outside, was hitting down from one side, and there was these nice shadows being created under the circular things. So
that's interesting, actually, because just before we started, you spoke about how you really like to, I suppose, own in on a specific detail and not make it so detailed, coloured, orientated.
Yes.
Why? Is that because with you touching upon, you find it so too overstimulating? You don't really know what to pick up first? Or?
Yeah, it's actually just to keep myself in check and in line with what I'm doing, because as soon as I get too playful with colours, I feel that I lose myself and I lose what I'm focusing on. Yeah, unless I'm doing something like life drawing, which is very, like you have, I don't know, 2 minutes to do this, so you have to focus completely. But if I'm taking longer with drawing, I might end up
the free time as well. You can,
exactly.
Well, and then in terms of those three designers, and just generally, I suppose, what fashion do you think makes for a good illustration? What do you look for then as a fashion illustrator, or just as an illustrator generally, that makes you really want to draw a collection and immerse yourself in it?
I guess because I also come from a sort of visual arts background and everything, I'm more interested in the body itself a lot of the time rather than the clothes, although often if there's a very nice interaction between the clothes and the body, then that's kind of the same thing to me. But I just really like movement and body shapes, how, like, from different perspectives, or if they're just twisting slightly, how that can change the way everything in the body sits.
Yeah, and the silhouette of the entire,
Yes, exactly. I find that really interesting, and yeah, I think shape is my most important feature, and then later on I can always add texture and colour.
I think especially looking at your previous work, so before, I mean, the work that we actually commissioned, you know, based on, for you to come in and do this, full of shapes and voluptuous figures and really body heavy, which is something that me and the gallery assistant, Holly, spotted immediately. Obviously, I think with you illustrating menswear, there's kind of there's less diversity in the menswear collections as there is women's wear. Almost it's less of a conversation. And I think if there was to be a runway show where it's just a bunch of skinny male models walking down, no one really bats an eyelid about diversity. So therefore it's kind of harder, I think, for someone like you who is so focused on that. So how have you been able to incorporate your kind of wants and desire to draw shapes and figures while interpreting Paris men's?
Well, in cases where it has been maybe less diverse model casting, like the Louis Vuitton, although by diverse I mean in terms of body shape. What I did was layering several figures to create a nice silhouette. So I did it in two different ways. One which was a bit straightforward, just one walking in front of the other, and then this one was a bit more collage-y.
It is very collage. I mean, in the best way possible. I am a massive advocate for collage.
Yeah.
The shades in this one as well, I think, obviously it's two separate people because it's, well, two faces. But I think even if you hadn't have done the two faces, just by the shades of the garments and the style of the garment, I think you'd be able to tell it was like two silhouettes merged, which is quite interesting. It's like you've implied it without the need of the face. But that's really nice.
So yeah, in cases where I have had to be more imaginative, that's what I've done. And then I have been pleasantly surprised, I guess, with, for example, the Rick Owen show. There has been a lot of different body types, and something I actually really like is androgynous bodies.
Right.
I don't necessarily want them to represent anything in particular, so that's something that I personally feel comes through with slightly fuller bodies. You get a sense of androgyny sometimes. So with this one in particular, I have not finished this. This is just something I started as a sketch, but I feel there is a sense of androgyny here, and I really love the body shape, and I wanted to focus this figure by itself because it was just really interesting to me.
From Rick Owens, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think illustrating that collection as an artist and illustrator would be really interesting because, I mean, the clothes are, well, the whole point was that they were all so similar and the same. But you can own in on different details, I suppose, via the way different bodies wear it.
Exactly, yeah.
Going as well into your background as an illustrator and artist, obviously I'm aware you've kind of just graduated, so kind of new to, like, are you freelance at the moment?
At the moment, yes. I've been working more on projects that I've sort of commissioned myself. I've been pushing myself to do, and then obviously with this as well. But I am looking for just freelance opportunities, and I'm looking out for event sort of work where I could work with life drawing and just things that I can just go to different places, work with like completely different people, designers.
Because where did you study? Was it London College of Fashion?
Yeah, London College of Fashion,
So can you talk a bit about that? And obviously, I mean, London College of Fashion is so well known for their illustration course. And so many artists from our own network that we work with have come from that course. And also kind of teaching that course now, which is amazing. Why did you choose to go there? I know that it's like for such a long time, it was the only fashion illustration course in the country. Were you diligently kind of wanting to go down the fashion illustration path from quite an early age? Was it something that just came naturally to you?
Not really. I actually didn't even know it existed until very close to the time where I had to decide what I was doing. So I'd always been more into fine arts. When I was in school, I did sculpture, and I mean, I did drawing as well, but I never saw that as the main focus of what I was doing. And then when I had to decide which path to go down, which course to do, I applied to different things. I applied to fine arts in Edinburgh and other places. But then when I actually, by coincidence, I was in London and I saw London College of Fashion on Oxford Street, and I was like, since I had in my head that I was applying to different places, I started looking through and I found the fashion illustration course. And it quickly became like my top choice because I realized that I could combine two interests, which was just art and fashion, but also I guess a worry of mine when I was deciding what to do was that maybe fine art would just be art itself, and that I would be only inspired by myself, my experiences, and I didn't really know what I would do later on in life, whereas this was something directly tied to an industry, and that I could envision lots of different working opportunities with people, which I thought would be really interesting.
So on that, what do you think makes fashion illustration relevant today? in 2024? Because I think there's been a conversation of obviously magazines. It used to be something where it was how magazines were illustrated quite literally before photography came in. And now I think there's been sort of a revival, a resurgence in the past, say, maybe decade. And yeah, what do you think makes it relevant today, to today's market?
Well, I just think that it is a lost art that needs reviving, because when everything is photographic, even though we have AI and a lot of things now that you can manipulate, and obviously there is a lot of creativity that goes into that as well, but there's something about illustrating that shows you can just narrow things down to one specific element that you're interested in, or it gives opportunities to artists as well to get involved with the fashion industry and see what comes from two different creative worlds merging together. And yeah,
it's so personal and tangible, I think, as well. And I think you touched on something really important there in terms of the two worlds colliding. Obviously with fashion and art, but on an even more personal basis, you know, designers put out their collection and that's their vision. But as soon as an artist interprets it, they can then add their own vision to it, and the collection could look totally different through their lens. So it's like the same clothes, but totally different appearance or anything.
Exactly.
Are there any fashion illustrators that you look up to specifically?
Fashion illustrators, yeah. I mean, obviously, my tutors were very inspiring to me, and because they were there through my entire journey of learning what even fashion illustration is, they were very inspiring. So they were Darren Davey and Alex Mean, and also I quite like one of the illustrators that I saw worked with you guys that I really liked is Sinise Jones.
Oh yeah.
I love her work. It's amazing. It's
I can actually see that in your work, especially in this one. I can see the influence there. The way she uses like shade, I think, in terms of without having to rely on colour to like bring out pops of shade.
I found that really inspiring. When I saw her work, I thought, oh wow, there's I don't know, I guess maybe it is what made me think of focusing in on shape by itself.
So what do you think makes a good fashion illustration?
I think there's lots of different ways for it to be a good fashion illustration, but that's a good question. I guess it needs to be contemporary. I think that any visuals that have something slightly off about it, weirdly, I don't like things that are too perfect, or I think having a contemporary coolness to it where you're just doing something new, you're purposefully not making, leaving things out, or
rather than the sleekness of it. You mean?
Yeah.
I actually think I've got to agree with you there in terms of like this one. I think is one of my favourites you've done, and the face is detailed, but it also lacks detail. Like it's not, you know, this one I'd say was more detailed, and like, you know, the way you've illustrated the pattern, it's clear what the pattern is. But it looks rushed in a purposeful way, and I'm sure it wasn't rushed, and that's kind of the beauty and the charm of it.
Yes, exactly. I think it takes a long time to learn how to do these things, and I don't think I'm there yet. I think I'm still learning, but there's a lot of people that do it really well, and I just think that not even just in fashion illustration, just artists, when you manage to perfect that, knowing when to stop and knowing when to add in a very specific region more detail than others, that's an art in itself.
It definitely is. I mean, it's a question that I ask a lot as well, just because it's not in itself, and I feel like the only person that knows when to stop a fashion illustrator is the person who illustrated it. But then they're also the least likely to know, because if they're so excited by something, and also when you're so close to your work, as you always will be, it's hard to have a kind of objective lens to look at it through. So you know, I mean, obviously you can like do your work, go away, come back and see if there's anything missing for you. But I think it's always hard to be objective about your work, and it's a skill in itself.
It is,
On that as well, I suppose my final question, so obviously you've just graduated from university and learned, and your style would have like kind of developed and evolved. Would you say you're still finding your style? How have you always Do you feel like you've always had a distinct style that you've gravitated towards, or is experimenting something that you're more interested in?
Personally, I've never seen a distinct style, but a lot of people tell me that they see when something has been created by me. So
Interesting.
that's something that we probably all share. All artists share that feeling of thinking that they're doing very different things, but no, there's always one very continuous line pulling everything together. But I guess I definitely am still discovering what my style is. And actually, weirdly, as soon as I graduated, I felt really lost, and I didn't really know with my final project where I was going. But after, in a couple months after I started doing this sort of thing, actually, I started going back to designers like Michaela Stark, and I remember that they started becoming very popular during the time I was at university, and I wanted to create work, but I couldn't really figure out how. So I kept them. I have, like, my Instagram archive is full of different images that I find interesting but don't really know what to do with. And then once I finished, I felt like I could go back to a lot of things that were interesting to me and actually sit down and consider, why is it interesting? What can I do with this? And that's how all of those figures that you saw in my portfolio and these ones are coming through.
And just, I mean, images will always be a main source of inspiration, won't they, for any artist working today, especially through Instagram. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. And us doing this live studio with you, it's been really great, especially immersed in the sculpture and your background in sculpture.
Yeah.
That's really well. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.